That dark chocolate bar in your pantry right now, the one you bought because it's supposed to be good for you, may have lead and cadmium in it, not a trace amount. Enough that 7 out of 10 major brands tested by Consumer Reports failed California's safety limits for heavy metals. I went through all 10. The results are not what you expect. Some of the brands that failed are the ones health-conscious people specifically reach for. The premium ones, the ethical ones, the ones with the certifications on the wrapper. Only 3 passed. This video tells you exactly which brands are which. Starting with the ones worth walking past, building to the worst offender, then ending on the 3 that actually cleared the testing. Stay through the full list. The ones near the top are the ones that are going to surprise you most. Number 10. Walmart Great Value Dark Chocolate. This is the most straightforward entry on the entire list. Not because the product is good, but because it never once pretended to be anything else. Great value sits at the absolute price floor of the chocolate aisle. Budget-conscious families reach for it because the savings are real, and at a certain price point, dark chocolate simply feels like dark chocolate regardless of what the label says. Here is what that price actually reflects. Walmart does not source cocoa and does not manufacture chocolate. Walmart issues procurement contracts to whoever can deliver a product meeting the minimum required specification at the lowest possible cost per unit. The cocoa origin behind a Great Value bar is whatever the winning contractor purchased that cycle. No named farm. No disclosed country of origin beyond the legal minimum. No independent heavy metal testing results published anywhere. Not on the label, not on the website, not anywhere a shopper could actually find them. The lowest cost cocoa in the entire global supply chain comes almost exclusively from West African growing regions. Ghana and Ivory Coast together supply well over 60% of the world's cocoa, and those same regions carry some of the most elevated soil lead and cadmium contamination profiles found anywhere in the global cocoa trade. When the only procurement mandate is lowest cost per unit, sourcing naturally flows toward the highest contamination risk. There is no disclosed testing checkpoint between that soil and the bar sitting in your cart. Great Value lands at number 10 for one reason: it never misled you. The price communicated the trade-off honestly. The brands higher on this list charge significantly more while hiding the exact same problem. But if you are feeding dark chocolate to children on a tight budget, this bar offers the least sourcing visibility in the entire category. That is worth knowing before you reach for it. The next brand has over $40 billion in annual revenue. It has every resource needed to fix this. The decision simply has not been made. Number 9. Mars Dark Chocolate. Think about every Mars product your family has ever bought. Snickers, Milky Way, M&M's, Dove, Twix. Mars is not really chosen, it is inherited. Families grow up buying it the same way they keep using the same bank their parents used, without ever really asking why. The familiarity runs so deep it almost never gets examined. And that is exactly why this entry matters. Mars Incorporated generates over $40 billion in annual revenue. The laboratory infrastructure, the supply chain oversight, and the origin-level testing protocols that would catch lead and cadmium contamination before a bar ever reaches a child's Halloween bag all fall well within what a corporation at that scale can comfortably fund. The decision to make it a genuine priority has simply not been made. Independent testing has repeatedly flagged heavy metal concerns across Mars Dark Chocolate product lines. $40 billion is not a resource problem. It is a priority problem. Testing cocoa at origin costs money. Acting on what that testing finds costs considerably more. That calculation gets made in boardrooms, not in laboratories. And here is the detail that lands hardest. Children are the core Mars consumer demographic. Halloween, Easter, birthday parties, movie nights. The population most vulnerable to lead exposure is the exact same population Mars has built its entire commercial identity around reaching, generation after generation. The revenue to address that gap absolutely exists. The urgency has never matched it. Great Value could not truly afford to fix this. Mars could. That is the real distinction. The next brand spent an entire century telling America it was something safe to hand to your child. Then a lawsuit arrived. Number 8. Hershey's Special Dark. Hershey's is not just a chocolate brand. It is an American institution. Hershey, Pennsylvania was built around the idea that quality chocolate should be affordable and accessible to ordinary families. Generations of children grew up with the Kiss, the holiday tin, the bar passed around the table at Christmas. Consumer Reports' independent laboratory testing flagged Hershey's Special Dark for lead and cadmium levels that exceeded California's maximum allowable dose levels. Hershey was subsequently named in a class action lawsuit alleging the company failed to disclose heavy metal contamination in products specifically marketed to families and children, at levels the state of California officially considers unsafe. The contamination here is not a manufacturing accident, it is a sourcing reality. Hershey sources cocoa primarily from West African growing regions carrying some of the most thoroughly documented soil lead and cadmium contamination profiles in the entire global cocoa trade. The cocoa plant absorbs whatever is in the soil. Those heavy metals move from the earth into the bean, and from the bean directly into the bar. Hershey knows exactly where its cocoa comes from. The question the lawsuit forces into the open is whether origin-level testing has ever been treated as a genuine priority for a company whose entire identity was built around being safe enough to hand to a child. The class action means these findings now sit inside a formal legal proceeding. That is what places this entry above the previous two. The brands higher on this list carry a different kind of failure, one that cuts deeper because of exactly who it reaches. Number 7. Lindt Excellence, the gold wrapper, the Swiss heritage. The 70% cacao positioning that somehow makes a chocolate bar feel almost medicinal. Lindt Excellence is the one health-conscious consumers reach for because every single signal it sends implies quality and restraint. Older adults especially have been drawn to it after reading the cardiovascular research on dark chocolate flavanols, that evidence-based language that makes a daily square feel like a health decision rather than an indulgence. Consumer Reports tested Lindt Excellence 70% cacao. It failed. Lead and cadmium levels exceeded California's maximum allowable dose levels. Now think carefully about what that actually means for someone eating a single square every day because their physician mentioned the potential heart benefits of dark chocolate. That daily ritual is delivering cadmium to the kidneys with every serving. Cadmium does not clear quickly, it accumulates. The kidneys store it over time. The damage is slow, invisible, and gives no early warning until years of quiet accumulation have already occurred. Someone eating Lindt Excellence daily for cardiovascular benefit may not be making a decade-long investment in heart health at all. They may be making one in cadmium exposure, and no cardiologist ever factored that into the recommendation. Lindt generates over $5 billion annually. The infrastructure to test cocoa at origin before production absolutely exists at that revenue level. The decision to prioritize it has not been publicly made. Excellence is on the wrapper. The laboratory results define what that word actually delivers. This entry sits above Hershey's because of who it is reaching. Older adults, often with existing health conditions, eating this bar daily for a specific medical reason, trusting premium branding as a proxy for safety. The gap between the brand signal and the testing result is widest exactly where the health stakes are highest. If this investigation is helping you make a smarter decision at the shelf, a quick like genuinely helps more people find it. The next brand is the one you grab when you think you are making the more conscious choice. Number 6. Trader Joe's Dark Chocolate. Trader Joe's built its entire identity around one specific promise. Affordable does not have to mean compromised. Health-conscious shoppers choose it because the store positions itself as the thoughtful alternative to conventional grocery. Responsible sourcing, curated ingredients, shelves that feel like someone already vetted everything before it ever arrived. Consumer Reports tested Trader Joe's dark chocolate. It failed. Lead and cadmium levels exceeded California's maximum allowable dose levels. That result lands differently than the Hershey result did. Hershey never claimed to be the health-conscious option. Trader Joe's entire brand proposition is built on exactly that claim. A shopper who reaches for a Trader Joe's bar instead of a conventional brand is making a deliberate values-driven decision. They believe they are choosing better. They are not. They are choosing the same heavy metal exposure, packaged inside a more carefully designed wrapper, at a slightly lower price point. Trader Joe's does not own cocoa farms. They source and private label. The cocoa supply chain behind their bar runs through the same West African growing regions, carrying the same documented soil contamination profiles as the very brands they position themselves as the smarter alternative to. The curated store environment does not change one thing about what the soil deposited in the bean. The trust exists because shoppers genuinely believe a higher standard is being applied on this specific safety question. The testing found it simply has not been. The next brand comes in a gold box. People give it to the people they love most. The ownership story behind it is something most buyers have never once been told. Number 5. Godiva. The gold box communicates one thing before you even open it. Someone thought carefully about this gift. Birthdays, anniversaries, Mother's Day. Families have given Godiva to elderly relatives and grandparents for decades, fully confident the premium price reflected a premium standard in every direction. Godiva was founded in Belgium in 1926. For most of its history, it carried genuine European chocolate craftsmanship as the absolute core of its identity. Then in 2019, a Turkish food conglomerate that also owns a broad portfolio of global confectionery and biscuit brands acquired Godiva outright. The Belgian heritage stayed printed on the box. The operational priorities shifted the moment that acquisition closed. Independent testing has raised heavy metal concerns across Godiva dark chocolate lines. The cocoa sourcing behind a brand now managed inside a global conglomerate optimizing across dozens of product categories is not receiving the farm-level scrutiny the gold box quietly implies someone is applying. People give Godiva to elderly parents, to grandparents managing health conditions, to someone who receives that box and feels genuinely cared for. The gift communicates love. The heavy metal content communicates something the giver never intended and the recipient was never told to even consider. The Belgian heritage stayed on the packaging. The accountability behind it changed hands in 2019. Most people handing over that gold box today have absolutely no idea that ever happened. The next entry carries the oldest name in American chocolate, and a parent company that has already appeared on this very list. Number 4. Ghirardelli. San Francisco, 1852. That founding date is not simply a number stamped on the packaging. It is the entire Ghirardelli identity. The oldest continuously operating chocolate manufacturer in America. The gold-wrapped squares that families have purchased across generations with the quiet confidence that 170 years of American chocolate history genuinely earns. Here is the ownership detail that reframes everything. Lindt, the Swiss parent company that already failed Consumer Reports heavy metal testing under its own flagship brand, acquired Ghirardelli back in 1998. Consumer Reports then flagged Ghirardelli dark chocolate for lead and cadmium content that did not meet California safety thresholds. 2 brands, 1 parent company, 2 failures inside the same testing cycle. The person buying Ghirardelli squares as a small daily indulgence reads that long history as a quality signal, as evidence that standards have been carefully maintained across the generations. The Lindt acquisition brought Swiss manufacturing efficiency. What it did not bring was origin-level heavy metal testing, because the Swiss parent company was not applying that standard to its own flagship product either. The history printed on the wrapper does not change one thing about what the laboratory found inside it. The premium packaging, the weight of the foil, the gold wrapping, the entire physical experience of Ghirardelli is genuinely elevated. The sourcing accountability behind the cocoa is simply not operating at the level that experience quietly implies. What comes next is the entry that hits hardest for the buyer who did everything right. Number 3. Endangered Species Chocolate. This is the one almost no one sees coming. Endangered species chocolate is the bar that people who genuinely research their food reach for when they want real certainty. The mission is printed right on the wrapper. 10% of net profits donated to wildlife conservation. Ethically sourced cocoa. Every element of the brand signals it is operating at a higher standard than everything surrounding it on the shelf. Now think about someone who has just finished cancer treatment. They are watching everything that enters their body. They research chocolate specifically before buying it. They found endangered species. Every signal the brand sends says this bar is cleaner, safer, more responsible. They buy it with total confidence. Consumer Reports found concerning lead and cadmium levels in endangered species dark chocolate. Here is the gap this exposes, and it runs straight through the entire ethical chocolate category. Fair trade certification audits labor practices and farmer compensation. Organic certification audits pesticide use during cultivation. Neither one requires independent heavy metal testing of the finished product. A bar can carry both certifications, donate genuine profits to documented conservation work, source from verified ethical farms, and still contain lead and cadmium levels that exceed California safety thresholds. The conscience is clean, the cocoa is not. These certifications were never designed to address this specific variable. They simply do not cover it. This sits at number 3 because the buyer it fails is the most deliberate one of all. The person who researched carefully, chose on both ethical and health grounds, and was never once told that the certifications they trusted left the single most important safety question completely unaddressed. The next brand convinced the most educated buyers they had already solved this problem entirely. Number 2. Theo Chocolate. Seattle, 2006. Theo launched as the first certified organic and fair trade bean-to-bar chocolate factory in the United States. That is not a marketing phrase. Bean-to-bar means the entire process, from raw cocoa bean to finished bar, happens under one roof with the manufacturer in direct control of every single stage. Health-conscious buyers who spent real time investigating their food landed on Theo and genuinely felt like they had found the definitive answer. Fair trade certified, organic certified, full bean-to-bar transparency. Everything aligned perfectly with the values of someone already reading every ingredient panel before anything went into their cart. Then independent testing raised heavy metal concerns across Theo dark chocolate lines that the full certification stack simply does not address. Here is what Theo's buyers need to understand. Bean-to-bar transparency means you can observe every stage of the manufacturing process inside the factory. But the contamination risk begins at the farm, long before the factory. Fair trade audits labor and pricing, organic audits pesticide use. Neither certification body requires cocoa to be tested for lead and cadmium before it ever enters the supply chain. A bean-to-bar factory with complete internal visibility can be processing contaminated cocoa with full documentation of every production stage, except the one variable that matters most to the person who bought it for health reasons. Theo built the most transparent chocolate manufacturing operation in America. That transparency carries one structural blind spot. Whatever happens in the soil before the bean reaches the factory sits completely outside the scope of every certification on the wrapper. Theo lands at number 2 because the buyer who chose it had every logical reason to believe the certifications they researched had already answered this exact question. They had not. That gap between the most comprehensive certification stack available and the one safety variable none of those certifications actually cover is the widest distance between implied promise and real protection on this entire list. Number 1 is the entry that will land hardest, because it is not a brand you chose. It is a store you chose specifically so someone else would do the checking for you. Number 1. Whole Foods 365 Dark Chocolate. Whole Foods has always sold something more than food. It sells a feeling. The feeling that the vetting already happened before anything ever reached the shelf. The lighting, the sourcing language on every shelf tag, the entire store environment, all of it quietly communicates that a rigorous standard was applied to every product before it arrived in that aisle. Choosing Whole Foods means accessing a layer of safety assurance that conventional grocery simply does not provide. That is what the premium is for. The 365 House brand is the purest expression of that entire promise. Simple, affordable, Whole Foods' own name printed on the label, which implies the store's own standard was applied to every formulation decision behind it. Now picture someone in the 3rd trimester of a pregnancy. They have eliminated deli meat. They are monitoring their caffeine carefully. They are reading every label on everything they buy. They chose Whole Foods specifically because the store's entire identity says someone here already checked. They reach for the 365 dark chocolate precisely because it is the store brand from the store they selected for its safety standards. Independent testing flagged the 365 dark chocolate line for heavy metal concerns. Whole Foods does maintain sourcing standards. Those standards address additives, preservatives, and artificial ingredients across many categories. But they do not currently require independent heavy metal testing with publicly disclosed results for every product carrying the 365 label. Amazon acquired Whole Foods in 2017. The premium positioning remained fully intact. The formalized, independently verified, publicly disclosed heavy metal safety standard for the house brand has still not been established. Every other brand on this list has an identifiable gap between a specific claimed standard and the actual testing behind it. Whole Foods is different. The store environment itself is the safety claim. The consumer who shops there is not trusting a label. They are trusting an institution specifically designed to make the label check feel completely unnecessary. The 365 bars is precisely where that institutional trust collides with independent laboratory results. The gap between them is the widest on this entire list. That is exactly why it is number 1. That was a lot. Take a breath, because here is where this investigation finally gets useful. 3 brands looked at the exact same sourcing landscape, the same West African supply chain, the same contamination risk, the same regulatory environment, and they made completely different choices. They did not wait for a Consumer Reports flag. They built accountability directly into the model before any product ever reached a shelf. Here is what that actually looks like. Best option number 3. Alter Eco Dark Chocolate. Alter Eco identified the certification gap and built something specific to close it. Fair trade covers labor, organic covers pesticides, neither covers heavy metals. Alter Eco understood that gap and deliberately went beyond what the certifications require. Independent heavy metal testing is conducted on Alter Eco dark chocolate lines, and results have consistently cleared the thresholds that flagged every single brand on the avoid list. Swiss-founded, carbon neutral certified. The cocoa is sourced from named farming cooperatives in Ecuador and Peru, 2 origins with documented lower soil contamination profiles for lead and cadmium than the West African regions supplying most brands above. That origin selection is not a coincidence. It is a deliberate decision to treat heavy metal risk as a variable to manage at the farm, not a problem to discover at the finished product stage. The certifications on the wrapper are genuine, and the accountability extends well beyond what those certifications require. If you have been buying ethical chocolate because of a fair trade or organic designation, Alter Eco adds the one safety layer the others left out entirely. The next brand took a different approach, and it starts with traceability. Best option number 2. Taza Chocolate. Taza does something almost no other chocolate brand in the United States does as standard practice. They publish their sourcing. Every cacao origin, every direct trade premium paid above commodity pricing. The supply chain transparency starts with a named farm in a named country and follows the bean through every single stage until it reaches the finished bar in your hand. That traceability is not just a value statement. It is the only mechanism that makes meaningful heavy metal testing genuinely possible. Contamination is a soil problem. It begins at the farm. The only way to manage it is to know exactly which farm your cocoa came from and test that specific origin before it enters production. When cocoa moves through anonymous commodity channels with no disclosed origin, there is no foundation for origin-specific testing because there is nothing left to trace. Taza's direct trade model makes that testing possible because traceability is built into the entire operation from the very beginning. Independent heavy metal testing on Taza has consistently returned results that do not trigger the thresholds that flagged every brand on the avoid list. The stone ground texture and the direct trade sourcing are not separate features. They are both expressions of the same founding commitment. Know exactly what is in the bar. This is what the bean-to-bar promise was always supposed to deliver. Taza actually delivers it. The final recommendation was built around this specific problem from day one, before any testing, before any headlines, before any pressure to act at all. Best option number 1, Posca Chocolate. Posca did not build a cleaner sourcing model in response to external pressure. It built one before any pressure ever arrived. Single origin cocoa, selected specifically from growing regions with documented lower soil lead and cadmium profiles. That sourcing decision is not standard practice anywhere in this industry. Most brands choose cocoa origin based on flavor profile, commodity availability, and cost. Posca factors heavy metal risk into that evaluation as a primary variable from the very first sourcing decision. The result is a bar that has cleared independent heavy metal testing. For most buyers, the question is simply which bar to reach for instead of the ones that failed. Posca answers that directly. But for certain consumers, the distinction goes so much further. A pregnant woman eliminating every avoidable contaminant. Someone in cancer treatment who reaches for dark chocolate because the antioxidant research is genuinely sound. A parent buying chocolate for a young child whose developing nervous system has no safe lower threshold for lead exposure whatsoever. For all of those buyers, Posca offers something none of the brands on the avoid list can provide. A sourcing rationale explicitly built to address the specific safety concern that brought them to this investigation in the first place. Allergen-free single-origin clean ingredient panel, available through specialty health food retailers and online. They did not wait for a Consumer Reports flag to respond. They built the answer into the model before the product ever reached a shelf. That is what real accountability looks like, before a laboratory ever makes it necessary. And that is exactly why it is the strongest recommendation on this entire list. Here is what to take with you. The dark chocolate research is real. Flavanols support cardiovascular health. The antioxidant profile is genuine. The science itself has not changed at all. What changes today is simply which bar you reach for when you act on that science. So before you buy again, do two things. First, check the origin information. If the cocoa source is not named clearly on the packaging or the brand's website, that is a question worth asking out loud. Second, look for any disclosure of independent heavy metal testing results. If neither of those two things exists, then the bar quietly carries a sourcing risk the label is simply not communicating to you. The three brands that passed, Alter Eco, Taza, and Pasca, answered both of those questions before anyone ever had to ask. That is not a coincidence. It is a sourcing philosophy, and it is the single most practical filter you can possibly apply the next time you are standing in that chocolate aisle. If someone in your life eats dark chocolate specifically for the health benefits, send this to them right now. They are reaching for these exact brands today with complete confidence and absolutely no idea any of this even exists. The information is yours now. What you choose to do with it is entirely up to you. This has been The Hidden Receipt, and the receipt as always tells the story the label never will.